Very intellectually exciting conversation. So the subheading for today is recognizing halves. Recognizing halves. Which means we are going to answer the ever-learning question is, how do I know if a fraction is bigger, smaller, or equal to 1/2? That's what we need to figure out for today. Let me give you a couple fractions to get us started on that here. If I said the fraction 5/8, if I said the fraction 3/5, and if I gave you the fraction 1/3. How do I know if something is the same as 1/2, smaller than 1/2, or bigger than 1/2? And here is pretty much the sum of the whole thing. You have to remember with fractions, the bottom number, which we call the denominator, tells you how many pieces you cut something into. How many equal pieces. So if I drew a picture of this, let's just say I do a rectangle, and I cut this into 8 equal pieces. Okay, that's how many equal pieces I have. Not my best effort with the equal pieces, but close enough. And the top number of that tells you how many you have. Okay, if I have 5 out of 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, will this fraction be more than 1/2 or less than 1/2, and why? I mean, if I was coloring this in, and I actually shaded in all of this stuff, do I shade in more than half of that rectangle or not, and why? David?
Well, you shaded more than half.
Okay.
There's 5 shaded in.
And how many are not shaded?
3.
3. So since there's more shaded than there's not, okay, it's bigger than 1/2. What about this one? I probably should have done an even number, but that's okay. If I cut this into 5 equal pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I shade 3 of them, is more shaded or more not shaded? More shaded. So this one is bigger than 1/2 as well. This one's bigger than 1/2. 1/3. I take this thing, cut it into thirds, and I shade 1 of them. More than 1/2, less than 1/2.
Less than.
Less than. Now, here's what we need to figure out though. We don't always want to, or do we need to draw pictures every time. There is a surefire way to figure out, without doing pictures, which ones are equal to, less than, or more than. First of all, how do I know if a fraction is equal to 1/2? Here, how about this? What if the bottom of my fraction was 10? I should cut something into 10 equal pieces. In order for me to have half of them, how many pieces do I have? 5. Or what if my fraction had 12 on the bottom? I cut a pizza into 12 pieces, I eat half of them. It is, James? 6. What if it was 50? 25. So how do I know if a fraction is equal to half? If, Caleb?
If the bottom one is an equal number.
If the top one is,
Half of that.
yeah. A fraction is equal to half if, write this down, if 2 1/2, if the top number, which we call the numerator, is half of the bottom. In each one of these, I take half a 10, half a 12, half a 50. You know, I didn't have a half there, so none of those are there. So, ladies and gentlemen, one thing I can understand or assume with this, if my bottom number is an odd number, let's say 9, will my fraction ever be half of 9? Will that fraction ever be half? Because what is half of 9? 4.5, and I won't put a 4.5 above 9 because we don't mix fractions with fractions. So, you know, if you think if it's got a bottom number of an odd number, it's going to be hard to get a number that's the same as half. But if I put 4 9ths in there, is this fraction going to be more than half or less than half?
Less.
Less, because you know 4.5 would be equal to. So this one is less than. Or if I said 5 9ths, 5 9ths is more than half because anything bigger than 4 is going to be more than half. Let's do some goofy ones here. What if I said 11 over 20? Is that fraction more or less than half? If it was half, what would be half? Half would be 10 over 20. But this is 1 more than 10, so this fraction has to be more than 1/2 because the top number is more than half of the bottom number. How about this? 49 over 100. Is that more than half or less than half?
Less.
Why? Because half would be 50 on top, and 49 is less than 50, so this would be less than 1/2. Now the book, in order to like really mess you up, well maybe they won't. They will ask you, they will ask you to do this. They will say compare this, 5/8 compared to 5/12. 5/8 compared to 5/12. Which one is bigger and smaller and why? And again, thinking about what we just talked about, thinking about how they compare to 1/2, Katerina, it would be
5/8.
is bigger than 5/12. Why?
Because you have smaller pieces.
Doesn't have anything to do with what the bottom number is. Doesn't have anything to do with what the bottom number is. Remember we just talked about. Think about how they compare to 1/2. Lexi?
Equal.
They are not equal. Josh?
Because 5 is more than half of 8. And 5 is less than half of 12.
Right. Thinking about what we just talked about, people. If you have an 8 on the bottom of a fraction, for it to be equal to 1/2, there'd have to be a 4 on top. But it's got a 5, so you know this one is bigger than 1/2. This one has a 12 on the bottom, so for it to be equal to 1/2, it would have to have a 6 on top. But it has a 5, so you know that one is less than 1/2. So if this one's bigger than 1/2 and that's less than 1/2, 5/8 has to be bigger than that. It doesn't matter what the bottom numbers are. And it doesn't matter what the top numbers are. It matters how the bottom and the top numbers compare. All right, let's look at another one. What about 24 over, I don't know, 50 compared to 3 over 4. How do those two fractions compare? Jackson?
3 over 4 is bigger.
Why?
Because it's more than half, and 24 is not more than half.
Right. And that's what you have to think about. You think about how they compare to half. For this fraction to be half, what would have to be on the top?
25.
Because that's the same as half. So this is smaller than a half. This one, for it to be half, would have to have a 2 on top, but it has a 3, so it's bigger than a half. if somebody said, I'm going to give you 24ths over 50 of a pizza, or they said, I'm going to give you 3/4 of a pizza, you better take the 3/4 if you're hungry, because that 3/4 of a pizza is this much of the pizza.
That's still not enough.
24/50ths of a pizza means you'd have to cut this pizza into 50 parts, and while you're cutting it into that many parts, you're only going to get less than half of the pizza. So this one is going to be bigger than that one. You don't have to want to draw pictures, but you just want to look at how they compare to 1/2.
50.
Hopefully you get that kind of thing. All right, got a quiz for you in lesson number 23.